Well, perhaps the greatest mystery of our new century is what happened to people on the Malaysian Flight 370. Where did that flight go? Where did the people go? Well, the truth is, nobody really knows, but we're going to discuss that on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Yep, it's what some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
Expressed in this podcast are those solely of individuals interviewed and participating in this show and do not represent those of Peacemaker Network and Charlie Crimebuster. All individuals described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, there is now new interest in finding the fate of Malaysian Airlines MH370, the aircraft that went missing on March the 8th, 2014. We're going to talk about that, but first let me take a moment to welcome you to the podcast, particularly if you're a new listener. We get new listeners every single week, and we appreciate each and every one of you. The thousands of downloads, well, it means a whole lot to us who are sitting on the other end of this microphone. Thank you so much for downloading this episode. Hey, if you haven't yet subscribed, go to your favorite platform. Subscribe to Charlie Crimebuster Crime Talk. We talk about these kind of things every single week, and we'd like to have you as a part of that great army of followers for Charlie Crimebuster. And for you that have been there all the time, thank you so much for being a part of the crime family. And I would like to say, if you'd like to reach out with a shout out, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. You can ask questions, you can make suggestions, you can even disagree with some of the things we say, or all the things we say. You have a safe place to disagree. We would love to hear from you. Again, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. Now, if you'd like to support the program, and several of you have mentioned that you would like to do so, and some have, and others are, and we appreciate it. You can go to peacemakernetwork.com. That's peacemakernetwork.com. You can not only help us support the podcast, but you can help us as we support America's heroes. Oh, yeah, that's those first responders, those that run toward danger, not away from danger. Yeah, I'm talking about law enforcement. I'm talking about the first responders, the firemen, and those EMTs out there. And I'm also talking about the military. You can help us help them. Again, go to peacemakernetwork.com for as little as just $3 a month. Man, you have that much change in your pocket. For that little, you can become a badge BADGE supporter. We welcome your support there as well. Well, once again, thank you for being a part of all this. If you'd like to have those links, the charliecrimebuster.com is our website. PeacemakerNetwork.com is where you can support the program, and you can reach me at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. We're going to put all that in the show notes, so you can easily just reach down there and click on it. Well, now back to our main focus. As I said, there is now new interest in finding that Malaysian airline. Wow, what a mystery. It was MH370, that was the name of the aircraft that went missing. Hey, it was carrying 227 passengers. That's not counting 12 crew members. They were heading to Beijing, China there, and they were coming from Kuala Lumpur. And when its radar was switched off, and get this, that plane was never heard from again. Now that search, well, of course it was suspended, but not immediately and not without cost. In fact, my friend, get this, the search for that Malaysian airliner that went missing, well, it cost the Malaysian government nearly $70 million. That's reported from the Sky News, Australia. And that multinational operation, well, it's been called the largest and most expensive aviation investigation in history. Yep. Hey, it spanned a distance, get this, of 46,000 miles. And yet, authorities from Malaysia, China, Australia, and other countries, they really had no success in finding it. So they called off the search back several years ago. However, now, family members with a catchy name, well, they're calling for action. Yep, on March 7th, 2023, just a couple days ago, it was reported that the Association for the Families, and that catchy name is called Voice 370. 370, the number of the plane. And this is the families of missing people on that plane. They are now calling for authorities to allow another search to take place. And along with that call to action, well, there's now a United States marine robotics company, Ocean Infinity. It claims to have new evidence. Yep, it claims to have new evidence that could reveal where MH370 is. And those families, well, through Voice 370, they're saying this, and I'm quoting the statement. They say, quote, "While the next of kin and the passengers on the crew board attempt to rebuild our lives, well, the threat of global aviation safety remains a live issue." And they went on to say this, quote, "As long as we remain in the dark about what happened to MH370, we will never be able to prevent a similar tragedy." Accordingly, we believe, they say, it is a matter of paramount importance that the search of MH370 be carried out to its completion. And of course, it's not complete now. So just how would authorities react from that statement from victims? These are victims. Their loved ones have vanished in midair, literally. You see, airplanes are supposed to go up and down, but they're not supposed to vanish. Well, here's a statement from Malaysian Transport Minister Anthony Loke. Here's what he says. He vowed not to close the book on MH370's disappearance, but then he said a little something different. He said a search will only restart if there is, quote, new and credible information on the aircraft's location. And my friend, adding to that cry for more action, there's even been a Netflix series produced on the mysteries. And there are a number of theories about what happened to that aircraft. Some of those are examined in that new documentary, MH370, the plane that disappeared. We're going to discuss those theories, but, it may surprise you that MH370, well, it isn't the only plane to go missing. There are others. I'm going to tell you about those in just a moment. But right now, it is time for what we call our Crazy Crook Story. You see, we tell those stories to sort of lighten the load, if you please, in what we share week by week. And I'm glad to know, and I hope you'll be glad to know, too, that all the crazy crooks just don't live in America, right? They're all over the world, right? Well, these are two Welsh tourists. You see, it seems like they ended up in court 2012, and as often people who end up in court, it was after they got drunk. But these drunks, well, they decided to go on a stilling spree, but not just any stilling spree. It seems, well, get this, they stole a penguin. That's right, a penguin called Dirk. And they stole Dirk from SeaWorld in Australia. Well, Owen Jones and Carrie Miles, 20, of South Wales, well, they broke into the park on Queensland's Gold Coast. They decided to swim with the dolphins a little bit. They actually let off a fire extinguisher in the shark enclosure, and that was before they took off with poor little Dirk. Well, I won't say so little. Can you imagine what happened? Well, they did. They woke up, hung over, and they had that penguin, flightless bird, in their apartment. Well, they tried their own stupid best as a crazy crook to care for him, tried to feed him. They even placed him in the shower. That's what the court heard. But then they said, well, we can't figure this out, so they released Dirk in a canal. But when they did that, they were spotted by the locals, and they called the Popo. And the Popo came and arrested these two crazy crooks. Well, they fined them $1,000 Australian dollars. I guess that's like $600 and something each now. And then they told him, patted him on the back, I guess, slapped him on the wrist anyhow. They told them to drink, quote, a little less vodka. These crazy crooks. Well, Dirk, you'll be happy to know, was rescued, and he was returned back to his home at SeaWorld unharmed. So, my friend, these idiots, these crazy crooks, who drank so much that they went out and stole the penguin, they are indeed Charlie Crimebuster's crazy crooks of the week. Back to our main focus. It may or may not surprise you that the Malaysian Flight 370, well, my friend, that's not the only flight to go missing and not be found. In fact, since 1948, get this, more than 100 aircraft have gone missing while aloft and have never been found, more than 100. Now, that's according to records compiled by the Aviation Safety Network. That's an international organization. Well, they track airliner accidents, hijackings, safety issues, and that sort of thing. And I guess I would say that the most popular and well-known instance you probably can recall if you've read your history. It happened in June 1937. Their celebrated aviator, Amelia Earhart. That's right, you remember that name, don't you, from studying it in school? Well, they set out to become, or she set out rather, to become the first woman to fly around the world. A trip of 29,000 miles. Now, she had completed all but the final 7,000 miles. She had done that by July the 2nd of 1937. And then her and her navigator, a guy by the name of Fred Noonan, well, they took off there in New Guinea for a 2,556-mile flight. They were going to go to Howland Island. That's a little small island out there in the Pacific. And there was a Coast Guard cutter. It was just stationed just offshore. The two other ships were along the flight route to kind of be markers for her plane. Nevertheless, that plane, well, it ran into some problems. It ran into overcast skies and some rain showers. And it made that way that they navigated back then, well, very difficult. And then the next morning, at 7:42, one of those ships that were out there, well, they picked up a transmission from Earhart. She said, quote, "We must be on you, but we cannot see you. Fuel is running low." And then about an hour later, she radioed. Well, she said, "We're running north and south." That, my friend, was her last transmission. That plane never arrived. And that mystery has never really been solved. Now, there are other like-minded instances. One that I found that I thought was very interesting as I reviewed this information was a military plane. That's right, a military plane in Vietnam. During the Vietnam War, it went missing without a trace. That was in March 1962. And it was the Flying Tiger Flight Line 739. That's Tiger Flight 739. And my friend, that contained 93 United States military advisors, 3 South Vietnamese officers, and 11 crew members. That plane vanished between Guam and the Philippines on the way to Vietnam. And get this, no wreckage was ever found. Even more interesting, those men that were on their way to fight the Vietnam War as advisors, well, those that lost their life have never had their names added to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial there in Washington. Even just more oddly, get this, no government agency, not the Army, not the Air Force, not the Pentagon, the State Department, even the National Archives or the CIA, none of them admit to possessing any records about that mission. Another mystery. And then in reviewing this information, there was this. Oh, get this. Hang on to your hat on this one. You see, during a routine training mission off the coast of Georgia back in February 1958, well, a B-47 bomber. Well, that bomber accidentally collided with an F-86 fighter jet. The pilot didn't see the bomber on his radar. The crash, well, it tore the left wing off the fighter, severely damaged the bomber's fuel tanks. And the pilot of that bomber was Air Force Colonel Howard Richardson. He really had a very amazing, agonizing dilemma on his hands. You see, my friend, get this. I said hold on to your hat. His aircraft happened to be carrying a 7,000-pound bomb. Yep, one of those H-bombs. Richardson, he was worried the bomb would break loose from his damaged plane when he tried to land. So to avoid that situation, well, he went with his only other option. He dumped that bomb. Yep, he dumped that bomb. Now get this. Just off the waters of Tybee Island, Georgia. Yep. Georgia, you got a bomb out there somewhere. That was before landing at Hunter Air Force Base just outside of Savannah. Now the Navy, they searched for the lost bomb, get this, for more than 2 months without success. And for decades, yep, its location has remained a mystery. Yep, an H-bomb dropped off the shores of Georgia, there in the waters. But don't worry, Georgia. The Air Force says the bomb presents really little hazard if it's left, get this, undisturbed. Hope a whale doesn't grab a hold of that one, right? But, folks, our focus today, it remains on the Malaysian Airlines MH370. And as you can imagine, there's been a whole lot of theories about really what happened to that plane. I imagine the most persistent theory is centered on the pilot there, Zahari Ahmad Shah, and suggestions, well, that it was a deliberate act. They said that right off the bat, just after the investigation started. They said it probably happened, he probably did it deliberately because he was facing personal problems. Now, theories posted that he actually locked his co-pilot out of the cockpit, closed down all communications, depressurized the main cabin, then disabled the aircraft so it would continue to fly on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. Now, there's also another theory, not only about the pilot, but they also think maybe the co-pilot. Mr. Ahmed there, he was 27 years of age. He was a co-pilot. And he was suspected by rumor spreaders to have overpowered the real pilot that we talked about a moment ago, disabled the aircraft. And again, they said he had personal problems. You see, some suggested that the co-pilot flew the plane to its doom, with the crew and passengers unable to get out through the locked door of the cockpit. Now, the theorists, they put forth that, well, he was having relationship problems. This was his own dramatic way of taking his own life. Yet, doesn't make a lot of sense because he was engaged to be married to another lady, 26, another captain, a fellow pilot from another airline. And people said he loved his job and there was no real reason for him to have taken the fatal action. Then there are others, well, they said because he's known to occasionally, he must be one of those Romeo-type guys, he occasionally invited young women into the cockpit there during the flight. They said he had done so this time, and maybe something went wrong. In fact, one young lady came forward and said in March that year she spent an entire flight in 2011 there being entertained by Hammond, who was smoking. Interest in that co-pilot, by the way, was renewed when it was revealed that he was the last person to communicate from the cockpit after the communication system was cut off. And there's even two theories, my friend, that has been put forward suggesting that the United States, that's right, the United States was responsible for shooting down the aircraft. One suggested that Washington feared that MH370 had been hijacked. That was about to be used to attack the U.S. military base there in the area in the Indian Ocean. The former French airline director, Mark Dugan, he put this forth. He said he had been warned by British intelligence that he was taking a risk even investigating this angle. However, there's really no way of checking whether he received such a warning or why he believes that Americans shot down the plane. But adding to the theory that the aircraft was flown there to that area by the pilot, or a hijacker, well, there was a claim that on the pilot's home flight simulator that a practice flight was actually been done on his simulator to that particular island they were talking about. And then there's another lady, a French lady, who wrote a book on this. After 14 chapters of her book, talking about all kinds of theories and putting them down, she put forward her own theory. Again, now watch this. She says it was brought down by a United States Air Force plane after a failed attempt to intercept the plane and seize, get this, a shipment of electronic equipment that was on its way to Beijing, China. Well, the U.S., she writes, did not want China to have that equipment. She says that Boeing 777's cargo was, well, poorly documented Motorola electronics equipment. She says that China wanted to get their hands on. She suggested it belonged to the United States and that China wanted to get a hold of it. Investigating the cargo, she says that it had not, that cargo did not even go through proper security screening. Something was up. Now, at that same time, of course, it was back during Obama's administration, and they were withdrawing troops from Afghanistan. Some really believe that the mystery cargo there in that plane, well, that it was a drone that was downed in Pakistan, or that it was other military equipment that had been captured by the Taliban. And then she goes on to say whatever it was, she believes that Beijing, the new leadership there in China, wanted to get their hands on it. They had routed it through that route that the plane took, and that it was being taken to China for that. Then she says the United States caught wind of that plot, and she said that the United States came up with a plan. They were going to intercept the cargo, force it to land, confiscate the cargo, and then just send it on its way with just a 2-hour delay. She said that's what the United States was really going to do. There was 2 military planes. Airwax was in the vicinity of that plane. That's been documented. And she says, well, then the plan went all to pieces because the pilots refused to cooperate. They would not follow the jets that were out there to, escort them to land. And said because that they would not follow the jets, well, then that the United States, well, they had no other choice. They shot the plane down. Yep, pretty far-fetched, isn't it? Well, here's another one. There's one person who actually sat on one of the scientific panels, and that person thinks that Russia wanted the plane hijacked, and they wanted to bring it to Russia. Yep, that Russia. They said they wanted that plane, so they hijacked it, took it to Russia, landed it, and we never heard from it since. The plane or the people. Yeah, there's some really far-fetched theories out there, isn't there? And then there's even 2 others who believe the plane landed in the ocean right near where it's last heard from. There was one person who was on a plane flying the other way, the opposite way. She said she was sure that she saw the plane from the air, that it has successfully landed in the ocean. Yeah, you remember that, like the Scully plane in New York. Wow, that was a miracle, wasn't it? Landed that plane, all those people got out on the wing. Well, this lady says she saw the plane, looked just like that it actually successfully crash-landed in the ocean, and that she actually saw people there trying to get out of the plane. Then there's another group of people. Now, they didn't search it literally by eye, but they did it by satellite imagery. And there's a whole group of people that did that. And they had these satellites images all across, and they would search them diligently. And one person said she definitely saw pieces of the plane right in the very area where it was last heard from. However, I got to tell you, folks, that's really a far cry from what the government says. You see, the government, with help from another company, they discovered that there were pings from the plane that showed an entirely different story. In other words, they could actually, off the satellites they had in the air, that this mystery Flight 370 would ping off of it, and they were able to track it, and that it actually took a diverted turn from where it was going to China, and then came way back around and was far, far away from the last intercepted communications. And, of course, that's where, actually, most of the search really focused on, where this plane went after the last communication. Well, what happened to it, my friend? Did it just crash right there, right after the last communication, and We missed it? Or did it take that turn? Go all the way back across the island and all the way back out in the Indian Ocean? Is that what happened? Have they found it yet? What about this idea that there's been debris that has actually been discovered that are parts of the plane? Is it true? Is it really substantiated? What happened to this plane? Well, next week I'm going to tell you what I really think happened to this flight. What I think happened to these precious people, these precious souls on board. That's what airlines call it. They say, how many souls do you have on board? 227 passengers, 12 crew members. What happened to these people? What happened to that plane? Well, next week on Charlie Crimebuster, we're going to share with you what we think really happened. And I think we've got some real good evidence to tell you the real story. So join us next week on our next episode of what really happened to that plane. We told you about the theories. We even told you about the fact that there have been other planes that had disappeared and vanished in midair with no explanation about what really happened. Well, next week, I'm going to give you an explanation. I'm going to tell you what I by far think that happened to this flight. Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you'll take time to reach out with a shout-out. You can reach me, Charlie Crimebuster, at gmail.com. CharlieCrimebuster@gmail.com. Don't forget, if you want to support, go to peacemakernetwork.com. And if you want to catch up on other episodes, we just finished the Murdoch Mystery. We'd like for you to be a part of that if you were not a part of that. Go to CharlieCrimebuster.com, CharlieCrimebuster.com. You can get caught up with all the other mysteries and the true crime that we've been reporting on. And until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert. For the life you save, it may be your very own.